The POCO M4 Pro has just been announced along with the POCO X4 Pro 5G, and when Xiaomi offered to send me this phone, I was really confused because the already budget POCO M4 Pro 5G is already out and you can already go and buy one now, whereas this one you can buy in, well, a few hours time after me posting this video. But there are a few subtle differences. Some things better than the 5G versions, some things not better. So this POCO M4 Pro has a 6.3-inch full HD AMOLED display with a peak brightness of up to 1000 nits. It has an up to 90 Hz refresh rate with Corning Gorilla Glass 3 on the screen. Now in terms of cameras, POCO are running a triple camera setup here instead of the 2 on the 5G model, with a 64 megapixel f1.8 main camera and a 8 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide camera, and also a 2 megapixel f2.4 macro camera. Otherwise, there's the same 16 megapixel front facing camera on the front, same side fingerprint sensor, headphone jack, same dual SIM slot IR blaster, same 5000 milliamp battery, same 33 watt fast charging, and the charger comes in the box. Thank you, POCO. So let's talk about the design briefly, because this is a big phone with that 6.43-inch AMOLED display, which can make it a bit of a two-hand job when kind of reaching all the corners of the screen at times, unless you fancy obviously readjusting your grip at the times and just run the risk of dropping it. But with that said, the back of this phone is plastic, which means it's actually fairly grippy, and it also includes a basic case in the box, as well as a pre-installed screen protector on top of that Gorilla Glass 3. So you get everything you need, even with this budget phone, to keep it in as good a condition as you can. Although, as you can see, plastic back does mean it shows up fingerprints. There is a fingerprint reader on the side, which is in a fairly natural and comfortable position, though something I wish Android makers could standardize on would be to have the power and volume buttons in the same place on all the phones. Anyway, and the triple camera setup has been enclosed in the back in a single piece of raised kind of plastic, which gives you no camera wobble when kind of tapping away on a desk. The POCO M4 Pro comes in black, blue, and a very bright yellow, which I actually love to see in person instead of the same kind of black phones each time. Now, from those specs, you might be thinking that this just sounds like a Redmi Note 11S, which hasn't made it over here yet, and well, you'd be right. Now, this POCO M4 Pro is one of their first phones, if not the first phone, to ship with their newer MIUI 13, which is based on the newly released Android 12. And this looks very interesting in a kind of Android 12 meets iOS skin. You swipe down, you get a very, very iPhone-like control center. And there's also the Android 12 features that matches your theme with your wallpaper, but you also get a whole host of apps on there that you never asked for. Some of them are useful, yes, but most of them are just an immediate uninstall just to tidy up the look of the phone. And so actually, before you get around to customizing to your own liking, it almost feels like you've picked up someone else's phone. You've got the normal apps that most people probably like all the usual Google apps, then also Facebook, TikTok, Spotify, but then you also have games like PUBG and Bubble Shooter, FM radio, Opera, and whatever the Agoda is. But generally speaking, the MIUI 13, at least for me, has been pretty solid. For a ridiculously cheap phone, it actually performs way above my expectations. And when comparing the fingerprint sensor on the side to a flagship phone like the Pixel 6 Pro, it actually is a better and more reliable experience. What? Now, if I was to pick out something that, even with the 90 Hz refresh rate enabled, the screen still feels fairly jumpy to me, particularly when scrolling through this app list. It's not the biggest issue in the world, but if you are expecting a pure 90 Hz experience with a budget phone, then you'd probably best be looking elsewhere. I have also had 1 or 2 bugs with using it over the last few days. When trying to play a film on Netflix, it hung, and as you can see here, when I did get it to play Happy Gilmore, swiping down to change the brightness was a bit challenging at times just because of that slower CPU. But with that said, on a positive note, there is expandable storage of up to 1 terabyte, which is really good to see once more on an Android phone. When you are watching the latest content, with the likes of binging the latest YouTube videos or watching something on Netflix, everything to me looked punchy and saturated and sharp, and again, keeping in mind the price point here, it is incredible for the price that you're paying. The always-on display though, weirdly, isn't an always-on display. You only get the option of tapping the screen to wake it up, so kind of missold on that one. You've also got stereo speakers, which helps when watching content whilst, slouched on the sofa, though the top speaker is noticeably different and with less bass than the Boston speaker. Kind of similar that we get on other Android phones, but more pronounced on this phone. Worth also noticing here that the headphone jack has made a return to Android, and it does work great, though pretty much all of my headphones are now wireless, thanks to Apple for removing that. Overall, however, the audio quality for me when playing at louder volumes gets very muddy, but as long as you're not listening at max volume like my default is, then you should be fine. Now for gaming, then this is also a pretty solid phone that doesn't also give you as blazing fast performance as the more flagship phones, but it's definitely not a slowpoke. I could comfortably win rounds in Call of Duty Mobile, as well as my years and years of dedicated gaming with Clash of Clans and Clash Royale, with a big, bright and responsive enough screen to have an enjoyable gaming experience. All whilst the phone wasn't getting too hot and and burning, this hole in my hand. And there is also a special gaming mode that you can use to stop things like notifications from popping up whilst you're about to win a game. Over in the power, battery and charging department, there's also good things. The 5000 milliamp hour battery does last a whole day, even if you spend a lot of your time watching videos and playing games, on phone calls or video calls, and I comfortably got through to the end of my very long sort of kind of 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. days without needing to charge. And when you do need to charge, there is no wireless charging, but there is a fast 33 watt wired charging on this POCO M4 Pro that takes you from empty to full in about an hour, which, given that it's a budget phone, is actually faster charging than an iPhone or actually even the brand new S22 Ultra, which is meant to charge at 45 watts but doesn't. Okay, so it's been a few days now and I have stuff to talk about, specifically that camera. So now let's talk about that camera. So turning the phone over and looking at the camera setup now, we have a triple camera array with up to 64 megapixels on the main shooter, along with an 8 megapixel ultra wide and 2 megapixel macro. Now these cameras are actually surprisingly good for their price. I'll be honest, when I started researching this phone and watched a few reviews about the POCO M4 Pro 5G model, which has a completely different camera setup to this, I saw that it wasn't that great. I mean, it took blurry shots, it was bad in low light, and you'll basically struggle to get anything good unless, the person you're shooting is sat still. But that is completely not the case with this version, with this new camera setup on the back. Yes, it's not perfect, and particularly here where I shot some portrait shots at a distance, and you can see it just totally buggered up what was in and out of focus here. But color reproduction was pretty good, it was okay. And I thought all of these portrait photos of my daughter would have been completely blurred out, given that she literally wouldn't sit still, but actually they're not. None of them were. So that is a huge surprise for me. Now, the one area it did struggle with was to get accurate colors under, I guess, what would be called challenging lighting conditions. See here from a trip where we took the kids to the theatre for the day, and parts of the image are too dark. The actual focus of the picture was actually completely washed out because that's too bright. And if you compare this to a flagship like the S22 Ultra, which I also had to hand at the time, it's a very, very different picture. But yet again, using that word, for a budget shooter, it is a solid phone and much, much better than I was expecting. As long as you have enough light there and it's not in really harsh conditions like a really bright sunny day. You kind of need that perfect bright but cloudy day to get the best from this phone. Video too, it's good and more than enough for most people who just want to capture what's going on at a budget, though it is locked at either 30 FPS or 60 FPS and also shoots in either 720 or 1080p resolution. There's no 4K resolution or options to switch to 24 frames per second. Now the same can be said for that selfie camera too. Make sure there's enough light and that your subject isn't moving too much. As you'll see here, not a great picture of my moving subject, once again. So as long as you avoid bright backgrounds and also make sure you turn off all of the beauty settings that I guess some people find makes them look better, but I really don't care for having bigger eyes or a more slender face or smoother skin, so each their own, but yeah, not me. I think if anything, I'm still a little bit confused over why this model exists, considering the 5G model was launched last year with a different camera configuration, and at an already very, very strong price. Personally, I'd have been tempted to upgrade just the camera array on the 5G version and then re-release that as, say, the S model or the Plus version of the M4 Pro 5G. If I was looking for a budget phone at least at this price point, then this is a pretty solid option. I love that it has a solid and reliable fingerprint reader. It's got good battery life with fast charging, and with everything just being an all-around good, you can't really go wrong with one of these if you're just looking for a budget phone. Just be aware of its limitations and how far you can push it with your day-to-day use. Now, if you want to know more about the POCO X4 Pro 5G, then drop a note in the comment down below. Maybe POCO can hook me up with one of those for next time. Otherwise, let me know what you think about this phone in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Next up, how about going to watch my review of another option when it comes to budget Android smartphones? And I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers!